Hey everybody, Miss Dietrich here. We're talking about the area of a trapezoid and why is the formula area equals half of the sum of the parallel sides, which we call base 1 plus base 2 times the height. Now this example here follows this trapezoid. We're going to be talking about this trapezoid in just a minute, but what I've done here is I've made two copies of the same trapezoid, and I just want to show you something. If we rotate this trapezoid 180 degrees, and if we were to slide it, oops, it's not quite perfect. If we were to slide these two things together, do you see that it would really form a parallelogram? And what's the formula for area of a parallelogram? It's base times height. Now, if we were to find the area of this parallelogram by putting these two things together, which it's not really letting me do that very nicely, we would be taking this and adding this to it to get the whole piece, and then we'd be multiplying it by this, which would be the height. Now, if we think about what's a trapezoid is actually a half of a parallelogram. So I'm going to delete that to get rid of that one. And let's look at the trapezoid that's on your homework, which is the same one we're just looking at. This is question number 4. This is really half of a parallelogram. So if we substitute in the values into the formula you can see there is area equals half of the height times the sum of the parallel sides, which we call base 1 plus base 2. So let's go ahead and substitute in the values. Half of the height. The height always has to be perpendicular to the parallel sides. Now, first of all, we should probably go back and identify why are we calling this a trapezoid and not a parallelogram? It's because, first of all, it's a quadrilateral, meaning it has 4 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the second requirement for it to be a trapezoid is you have to have exactly one pair of parallel lines. This line and this line are parallel. This line and this line are not parallel, because if they were, then we'd be looking at a parallelogram. It's a trapezoid. So the height would always be perpendicular to the bases. So that's this number. Now, even if they gave you this number, let's pretend they told you that this was a 7 and this was also a 7 because it's isosceles, which means it has to be the same. We would ignore that because we don't need it. If they wanted the perimeter, then you would need it. But for area, we would ignore that. So let's substitute in the height right here. And now let's plug in the parallel lines. So what you call base 1 doesn't matter. So let's take the top one and call that base 1. And let's call this base 2. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is follow order of operations. We're going to go ahead and add these two values together. So 9 is the same thing as 9 and 0/10 plus 4 and 5/10. Alright, so if we add these up, here we get the 5. Bring the decimal down. This plus this gives you 13. Alright, so if we copy everything neatly, we're talking about half times 6, and this means times, so I'm just going to throw the symbol in there. 13 and 5/10 was the sum of 9 plus 4 and 5/10, so we'll write it right here. Alright, when you get to this point, we have 3 factors. Whenever you're taking half, you want to look for whichever number is even in easy mental math. Now, since we can take half of 6 easily in our head, we're going to do that next. Half of 6 would be 3, and let's bring down what's left, which is 13 and 5/10. Alright, so the only thing left you have to do is find the product of 13 and 5/10 times 3. Just be careful with your decimal. Find that product, and whatever you get will hopefully be one of these answer choices over here to the left.